This is Louie Zumbach with Rush Hour Ag. Leave your message after the tone.
Hey Louie, it's Elliott Henderson. Can't wait to tell you about
rolling down the back road, truth riding with the dust, talking agriculture policy with people you can trust. From the field to the Capitol, we're breaking it down. Real talk, real issues from a real farm town. Every hour's rush hour when the work won't wait, so we're cutting through the noise and setting things straight.
What's your rush today, Elliott?
All right, listeners. It's the Rush Hour Podcast. I'm here with Louie Zumbach. What's your rush today, Louie?
Well, Elliott, today's rush has just been, like most days, a little bit of everything. How about you?
Well, we were rushing around down here in Johnson, and we're up here in Slater now. And I was down there for the Iowa corn growers today, and we were on the Capitol yesterday. And, today we're going to learn a little bit about Louie Zumbach.
Well, I hope you're interested in it.
I know there's a lot to learn, so let's get started.
Sounds good.
So, Louie, I've known you for, probably going on 5 years now. I think the first time I met you was in your farm shop, and we were putting parts on a planter, and I know your nephew, second cousin.
Yep.
And he's a precision planting dealer down there. And, I pitched a few ideas that I'm passionate about to you, and it was an experience, I guess I'll say, that I wasn't surprised, but when I have these conversations, a lot of these ideas that I have don't really latch on right away, but think about it a little bit.
Elliott, I find that you're a man that likes to throw a lot of mud at the wall, and that's not all bad because once in a while something sticks, and that certainly happened when we were in Denver a couple weeks ago. You threw something out there that my wife and I have kind of been working on in our personal lives, and that really stuck, and especially when you lined up that meeting to go to the
Cattlemen's Land Trust.
that really stuck with some other things that I had seen and been witness to. So, and some of your ideas, they kind of fall off the wall, but
They might be a little
how
nitty
life
too,
is.
yeah. Well, let's get started. I'd like to learn a bit more about you myself. As we're beginning to develop this relationship and this podcast, we need to learn a bit about each other. So I'd like to hear about your background, kind of where you came from, and learn about your family. So if you don't mind sharing about your family first.
You bet. So my wife Deb and I have been married for 36 years. We've got 4 daughters and 4 grandsons. So kind of funny how life works out. My oldest daughter, Brandy, she followed my footsteps, I guess, into politics. She's a Lynn County supervisor, taking my spot last January. My daughter, Taylor, she lives in Des Moines, and her and her husband both work in the Des Moines area. My daughter, Allison, and her husband, Luke. Allison teaches school, and Luke actually farms with us. And then my daughter, Rachel, here, she works for a farm for profit, which is where we're at today filming this, and kind of got me started in this thing. And her and her fiance, she's going to be married this July. They have a cattle operation near our farm, not on our farm, but near it also. So that's kind of my family, my extended family. I have a second cousin, Jared, that when before my kids were old enough, I didn't realize that any of them would want to farm. Jared, I knew always wanted to farm, and I needed some help. And he had a real passion for farming and doing that. So I invited Jared to join our farm. I think that's probably 12 years ago already. And he took on a precision dealership, which he's invited Luke, my son-in-law, to be part of that, along with farming. And then we have another young man that I've helped get started farming. He also works for me. He came when I had heart surgery. Actually, he came and started working for me. I think he's been there for 6 years. So that kind of wraps up how I was able to do some of the other things in life and get away from the farm, as I've got great, responsible people on the farm.
I've been lucky enough to meet those guys, and Jared's close to my age. In fact, Luke Sweeney, he's from close to where I grew up in Independence, so I'm familiar with the families, and they're fantastic, hardworking people, and passionate about agriculture, just like you are.
Oh yeah, I'm a lucky guy. If I could pick 4 great son-in-laws, I certainly have them.
On the farm, so farming has been your background. What are some of the policies that drive your everyday life on the farm?
Well,
What gets you up in the morning?
You're right. Alarm clock. Uh, no, you're right about that. Policy drives everyday life on the farm for when you get up to all day long, and you may not even realize it. But just the other day, uh, I set a I set a fire in the road ditch and got a phone call that did you realize the burn ban wasn't lifted yet? Well, there's policy or an ordinance that obviously I didn't know that, so I let it go out and it distinguished itself, but didn't keep burning after that. But I started back up Monday and after the burn ban or Tuesday, I guess it was after the burn ban was lifted, and that's just a simple policy, burn ban, but that dictated what I was going to do that day, whether I was going to burn or whether I wasn't, along with the weather, of course. Uh, so it can be the simplest things, but it's policy, and it's all around us. Whether it's the farm program or a simple thing like burning or applying pesticides or water quality. I mean, we're surrounded by policy every day. We just don't realize it or take the time to realize it.
It's almost as common as the air we breathe, and I think that's what's going to be so engaging with the conversations that we're going to have is that you know people don't realize how what the decisions that are made today are going to affect how we do go about our day tomorrow.
Sure.
And I think this dialogue and this conversation, it's going to be something unique, and I really look forward to it.
And I think it's always been like that. For it depends what generation you grew up on. But my father was a uh, World War II vet. He was born in 1923, so he grew up during the Depression, and his life experiences dictated what he'd done. And in all honesty, they dictate quite a bit of what I do yet. Although maybe not to the extreme. I don't keep all the crooked nails after I pull them out, but we kept crooked nails, and some days that's what you did is you straighten nails if it was raining out, and that was probably just to keep me busy.
So,
but it seemed like that was a thing to do.
so I'm a student of history, and I think understanding people's backgrounds just gives me a lot of insight on how to better understand somebody. And so, what I'd like to ask, is what's kind of some of the history of the farm? Because I know there's a lot of Zumbachs, and if you could just tell a little bit about the story of like how you built the beautiful farm. You have a very unique operation. It's a very picturesque operation. It's something that I'd aspire to be as proud of something that you've built. Can you share a little bit of the history of how you put together what you put together in your farm?
Yeah. So, well, the homestead that we live on, Deb and I live on, we actually bought that after we were married. Uh, and I do like to think of it as a show place. My wife is very talented at gardening and keeping the place looking nice. Most of that's her doing. I do run the lawnmower a little bit, but she just is remarkable at getting those things done. Ironically, it was 2017. My and I've always tried to keep my place looking good, and part of it's just in honor of my father who passed away when I was in high school, and that just has helped me keep his memory alive, I guess. But ironically, my mother passed away. I believe it was July 3rd. Uh, I know it was because the next day I had a parade to do, and I actually did go do it because I knew that she'd want me to. But ironically, our Iowa magazine called on July 5th, and he had just drove by out of the blue, seen the farm, wanted to know if we'd be willing to be in that magazine that year. And then we were put in the hardcover at the end of the year, and we truly were one of the prettiest places in Iowa. And that's always an honor and a burden because now you have to keep it like that all the time. So it works both ways.
Well,
But
oh, go ahead. You mentioned your father was, around during the Great Depression. He was in World War II, I think. So you're like one of the last boomer generations.
I was born in '65. You pointed this out the other day, so technically that doesn't make me a boomer. Only I realize that I want to be a boomer. But the other definition is if your parents were or your father was in World War II. So I go with that one, and to consider myself a baby boomer yet. But a little bit of history of the first thing I can tell you, because I get asked this all the time: are you related to so and so, Zumbach? And the short answer is yes. We may be fourth or fifth cousins, but of all and we do, a lot of us live and farm in the remote area in eastern Lynn County, Delaware County, and Jones. But we are all related, and we actually all get along well and work well together. We don't farm together necessarily, but if somebody needs help, they're the first ones there, which is kind of neat. And we are kind of a political family, so the easiest answer is yes, we are related. And if you want a little more history, it all started with four brothers that came to America from Switzerland. They were the oldest in their family. Uh, Basically, there's famines going on back then in Switzerland and all over Europe. One of them stayed in Wisconsin, never got married, and was a cheesemaker, from my understanding. And the other three all ended up right out there by where we're at. My cousin Lauren owns what I consider the old home place. That's where my father was born, in the house, and it's just 2 miles north of where we live. And so we have a lot of family history right out there. And I believe the first farms were bought in well, actually, I consider myself a fifth generation farmer. I'm a fourth generation Zumbach farmer because my great grandfather married the Abbey girl, and the Abbeys were already farming.
So I remember one of the first times I was in your shop, in the office down there. There is a sale bill on
Yes.
the wall in there,
Yep.
and it was striking to me because I can remember, before I went into the service, I had a herd of cattle, and it was a very emotional thing, liquidating my herd so that I could leave and go serve our country. And I just thought that was something that I, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, of course I wasn't around, but yeah, when my dad was when he enlisted,
Mhm.
but he was farming, and he had a sale because you didn't know if you were coming back or not. And so I have the sale bill from that sale, and I have it hanging in my shop along with my grandpa's sale bill from when he sold out and retired. That one does not have a year on it, and I don't know the year, but Dad's had a year on it, and or has a year on it.
So do you
And
remember like when he came back? How did he get back into farming? When did he marry your mother? You got any of that?
boy, I can't tell you what year they got married. I can tell you they built a new house there. I own the old, what we'd call the home farm for my immediate family. And I know that my grandpa and his brothers and some relatives that were carpenters built that house. My daughter Brandy lives in it, and her husband Michael now. Ironically, my cousin Doran has the Oliver 60 that the Messerlys, which uh, the Zumbachs married, two Zumbachs married two Messerly uh, girls, so we're actually double related, some of us cousins. And anyhow, one of the Messerlys owned the Oliver dealership in Monticello, and Ed Cox owned the farm that I grew up on. And somewhere through all this, I don't know how, I don't know what year, but Ed Cox ended up with the Oliver dealership, which became Monticello Equipment back then, and Dad ended up with that farm. And I know Ed and Dad remained close throughout my dad's life.
And what you were born in '65, so your dad did pass away when you were pretty young, but you had some really cool years growing up farming with your dad too.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He passed away when I was in high school, but he took me everywhere. Farm sales, looking at horses, looking at mules. He had draft mules. We had two teams of draft mules. Uh, he was a dairy farmer. He was actually the president of the National Ayrshire Association. Ayrshires was the cows that Dad bred and sold all over the U.S. So uh, we were going to sales all the time. It was pretty exciting for a kid. I was always proud of my dad and proud of the things that he'd built. And yeah, I was the kid hauling in silage loads and mowing bales, and then one day I was the kid that was driving the chopper. And
What was it like farming back in the '80s or
it was
'70s?
great. We had levers that actually moved and went up and down. And if it wasn't working quite right, you went out and spun a couple nuts on the back for the hydraulic lever to change the cable or something. You didn't have all this, all these nice modern conveniences that when they quit going, uh, oh golly, I can't plant now because my GPS went out and my guidance is gone. That only happened when the marker got too close to the fence and you broke it off. That was my very first experience planting corn.
Well, looking back, like seemed like it was a very romantic time in agriculture. Like it was cool to be a farmer in the late '70s, early '80s. I mean, people were profitable, people were making money.
Well, I think that was a two-edged sword because the farm crisis was in there too. So, uh, I'd say farming back then was a two-edged sword, but it is kind of funny that you're asking me these questions because I remember one Christmas, I believe my nephew Ethan was asking questions about growing up, and so I was telling him my experience. Now, I'm 11 years younger than my next sibling, and I'm 14 years younger, I believe, than my brother. And so uh, I was talking about growing up, and my brother just looked at Ethan and said, "Yeah, it wasn't that good." But we kind of grew up with a different set of parents because or a different set of equipment and different set of everything because we had a skid loader by the time I was cleaning out them pens that my brother had to use pitchfork on. So I probably do look at it a little different than he does.
Do you remember like the ag policy at that time? Like, was your, your family's pretty political. So do you remember family being involved with at that time?
I really don't remember him being involved in that type of thing other than going to a few things with my dad. I remember when Jimmy Carter was elected. I remember Dad being pretty disappointed and mentioning that a few other people were probably pretty happy that day, but he wasn't one of them.
I
Uh,
I had a I got to live in Georgia,
okay.
and I miss Georgia and I miss the people in Georgia. But I was stationed down there, so I was in the service, and I missed farming so much. In fact, I was supposed to fly back to Iowa to sign some paperwork at the FSA office, but they had to find me an office close down there. And so I got off early on a Friday afternoon and went to an FSA office, and the whole way there, all I saw was Georgia pine trees. And so when I got in there, I asked that guy, "Where's all this agriculture at for Georgia?" And he said, "Oh, just take 224 back to Fort Benning, and you'll see everything you want to see." And I was driving back, and I saw corn and cotton and sunflowers and peaches and pecans, and I said the next place was some John Deere tractors. I'm gonna stop at it. And I struck up a relationship with an old gentleman named Frank Bledsoe, and he talked about the Carter years. And Jimmy Carter like lived right around there and grew up around there, and those guys were all pissed. They would put out wagons on the side of the highway and say, "Send Carter back to Georgia. He's not doing us any good in D.C."
Yeah, those were different times. I mean, I remember posters being around with something about trading food for weapons or something. But yeah, back to policy though.
Yeah.
It just affects your life every day, whether you realize it or not.
So this policy, and you were aware of this policy, and you were breathing policy every day. When did you've gotten involved in politics? I mean, I knew you were involved, as a firefighter, not so much in politics, but more public service. So maybe if you want
Oh,
to share a little bit about public service, and then we can talk about how it got you into politics.
sure. So yeah, I was a volunteer firefighter for quite a few years. That kind of started one day. There was a barn fire, and I happened to be driving through Prayberg, and the fire chief grabbed me and said, "We're short of help. You know how to drive a truck. Hop in and go. You're covered by the Good Samaritan plan or whatever." And so I drove the truck that day, and by that night I was a volunteer fireman So that's kind of how that got started. But yeah, I've been the county fair president. I was the county extension chair. Uh, been a supervisor for Lynn County. Been in the Iowa House of Representatives. uh, and numerous other organizations that I've been a part of. So I've done a lot of volunteering. Some of it's paid, some of it isn't, but it's all volunteering at some sort because you just end up with a lot of hours in it.
So the Iowa House, I can remember when you were involved down there, and I mean, I know you were super busy down there, and there's a lot of policy. There's probably some things that you're really proud of. You mind sharing some of the stories about when you were working at the State House?
Um, sure. So it was a great experience. I had no intentions and didn't even think about running for an office. We talked about it at an earlier episode. I was actually pushing snow. Got a phone call from Speaker Linda Upmeyer. She'd gotten my name from somewhere that she thought that or somebody thought I'd be a good representative of the people. It was a tough race. It took us quite a few days to decide, and Deb and I finally decided that we'd do it. And if you're ever asked, you have to decide then because although it wasn't the best time in my life to do it, by the time it might work out in my life, I might not be needed. So we decided we'd do it. We came up with four, I think, things that we wouldn't do. One of them was anything that we were going to advertise or anything had to be truthful and checked out and pass the KCRG fact finder deal. And we weren't going to publish anything about my opponent, whoever it would be, family or anything. And we weren't going to get personal. So it all had to be factual. It turned out I had a great opponent the first time. And we actually turned out to be kind of friendly in the end. Didn't know him from Adam to start with, and he didn't know me either. But you're in a parade every weekend, and we were generally one or two floats away from each other. So by the end of the race, I think I took him a bunch of my note cards I had left and just gave them to him because I said, win or lose, it's still good paper, and you can still write on it. So it was an experience that if you ever get the chance, I encourage you to take it. Uh, and as far as being there, uh, I made a lot of good friends there that are still friends today. We didn't always vote the same. We didn't always agree, but always were friendly regardless of the result. And as far as specific bills uh, or things that weren't done, I feel bad that I couldn't do more to keep the Duane Arnold power plant open. That's a local issue along with the state issue because a lot of power for Iowa came from that power plant. Uh, and now they want to, there's talk of reopening it, and so that's always been kind of a sore subject for me because I felt that I wasn't always told the truth from the powers that be there. And right now another issue was the right of first refusal, which is a company wants the right of first refusal to put all power lines up in Iowa. That actually passed while I was there in a omnibus bill. I didn't vote for it, but it did pass. The Supreme Court actually took it out, and now it's back. So some things never die. But I just can't fathom why anybody thinks that's a good bill to have because limiting competition usually is not good for the consumer.
So you mentioned an omnibus bill. What is that?
What's an omnibus
What is?
bill?
Yeah, I know what one is. I just learned. I just got refreshed with one it is, and it's like I don't think a lot of our listeners would really understand what that is.
An omnibus bill is when you take all a bunch of ideas that probably don't have enough strength to maybe pass on their own. So you lump them all together and then pass it with something that most people have to vote for some reason other, like perhaps a budget bill. And so that's where pork kind of comes from. And so that was passed in one of those types of bills. Uh, so it was passed with a lot of other things, and a lot of them other things I was actually for, but I was so wound up on how that just seemed wrong to me that I couldn't get past voting for it. But a lot of times, you might be for 80% of something. You might really dislike 20%. And that's probably the way this was, only I just couldn't get over the 20%. It was too big a hurdle for me.
So to like some of our listeners that are new to politics and wanting to learn a little bit more about how they work, like the Farm Bill, for example, with SNAP.
Okay.
That's like an omnibus bill, right?
I don't know if I'd quite. Well, it definitely has a lot in there that doesn't really go together, and a lot that does not affect farms. That is correct. Yes, I don't know that I'd call it. To call it an omnibus bill, I'd probably have to say, okay, let's throw that in with. Well, it kind of is because you're right. They get enough votes for it because you got the votes that want to do the SNAP along with the votes that want to do the ag, so we keep it together, and therefore it overwhelmingly passes.
So like today, do you think the political environment we're in today that we can maybe step away from this type of government and this type of policy making?
Oh, I don't think you'll ever step away from it because that's one of the neatest things about becoming part of how it works is you get to actually see how the sausage is made, and that's what they call this, how the sausage is made. But you can take your one good idea, you take it down and get a bill drafted for it, and then you have to put it out there. And that's when it starts getting changes. So it might come back, and I actually seen this once where a bill went out, got a number, came back, and I was for it when it went out, and I wouldn't even vote for it when it came back. And I've also seen a bill go out as one thing. They do what's called a strike after. So basically, you got the title. They did a strike after everything passed the title and totally changed the bill. And I wish I could remember what it was about. But the other side actually talked about it while we were in the House for like 2 hours. And we weren't even talking about the same bill anymore because it was a strike after, and they were talking about the bill prior to the strike after, and the new bill was totally different.
So like we live in the days of Doge today, and more simplicity, cutting out the crap. I mean, Don't you think we can go to a day where we have one-page bills and we just, if it's good, it's good, it's done. If it doesn't,
You'd like to think so. I don't know that that'll ever happen,
okay.
but I'd like to think so. Yeah.
I'd love
And
to
I
see that
actually
happen.
did. Are you familiar with that TV show Yellowstone at all?
I like the old ones. I like the 1923. I just
Okay,
can't.
all
I
right.
mean,
Well,
I'm a Costner fan. I just
I,
can't get onto the modern.
I just found it interesting. I seen this on Facebook just today that Doge actually started with Yellowstone. They had
Okay.
an episode where he got rid of everything when he was governor. It's kind of funny. Guess you had to see it.
I guess maybe I'll have to tune into that episode.
I think actually Doge though started maybe during Obama or somewhere that Clinton maybe was gonna do
Okay.
these things.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it was cool then.
We'll have to get some more. We'll have to talk more
We'll
about
have,
that.
we'll have to do a little digging.
So you were down at the state or at the Capitol.
Yes.
You were in the House side.
Yep.
And then you kind of decided to step away from that a little bit.
Yeah, I actually wasn't feeling very good. Got home, uh, got feeling a whole lot worse. Went to a nurse I knew. She took my blood pressure. I was pretty much, well, to make a long story short, I had heart surgery a few days after that. I had all 5 arteries replaced in my heart. Uh, just thankful to God that I'm still here. A lot of people maybe wouldn't have went to the doctor and had that same diagnosis that quick. And through that, my family, my kids and wife, thought, you probably didn't need to be going to Des Moines and that. And so I chose to step down from that. And through the course of that, in the back of my mind, I'd always thought about running for county supervisor because that actually probably affects you more than a lot of other things, your county supervisors. And so at the time, we had one party running the county, and I decided to throw my hat in for county supervisor, and I won the seat. So
and you were not a part of that party that was running.
no, I'm in the Republican Party, and in Lynn County, it's a very blue county. So I'm actually, or was actually, the only elected official on the countywide basis that was Republican. But was always honored that the people thought enough of me to support me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So your daughter is gonna take.
Yeah. Well, then, so yeah, so to come full circle, last, well, 2 Decembers ago, so not last December, December before, I had some issues come back to haunt me, which my doctors got them corrected now. I'm working on correcting them. But I just didn't have any election in me at the time. And you have to decide early whether you're going to run for office or not. And through the course of that, I've got a good friend that's actually a lobbyist. But he knew I was having some health issues again. And through the course of all that, my oldest daughter, Brandy, expressed interest in becoming supervisor. And that other person, I mean, I'm biased, so I always thought she'd be good at it. That other person actually, kind of vetted them and all that, and he agreed that she would be a great addition to the supervisor. So she actually ran for my seat, and she was fortunate enough to also to gain the support of her constituents, and so she's the county supervisor now, and I am retired from being an elected official. I'm not retired from farming, and I'm really probably not retired from politics because here I am going to do a podcast with you, Elliott. That's going to be largely based on policy. And policy is what I'm talking about is the things that laws and ordinances that are done that affect your everyday life.
So, like some of these regulations and affecting, we talked about at the state level, and you come back down to the county level. There's cities and there's employees in these cities. Are there any those regulations that affect those people? What were some of the things that you did when you were at that county level?
Well, we had really an astronomical 4 years of being there, and really at a supervisor level, it's really not terribly partisan. I mean, all three of us, there's 3 supervisors there, all 3 of us wanted the best for the residents of Lynn County. One thing people don't realize, that county supervisor's jurisdiction, our jurisdiction's not in any town in your county. Our jurisdiction's the unincorporated area and the buildings that we have within. So if you have a problem in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, or Independence, Iowa for you, your county supervisor has no jurisdiction there. And a lot of people don't understand that. They also don't understand the property tax side. The side that the county actually takes, yeah, you get the bill from the county, but the portion that the county's taking is very small. I think it's about 15% in Lynn County. The rest is your city and your school district. So, people they're upset about their total tax bill, and I understand that. I'm not too fond of mine. But the county portion of it's pretty small.
Well, and that's something that you and I have been talking about here with some of this information that's coming out about 2026, and we're going to right now the talk is to get rid of the rollbacks on egg structures, and I'm really concerned that how that's going to affect agriculture, and it's going to affect especially like the animal husbandry industry.
You bet.
And I think it's going to take voices like ours to make sure that people are aware of these policies that they're working on right now and how it's going to affect them moving forward.
I agree. It's going to be extra burdensome on the younger farmers. Farmer my age, if I didn't have these younger people coming in, taking over, I could stroll out with everything that I have, and the rollback will still be there the way I understand the bill the way it is right now. It's from buildings built 26 on would be taxed at 100% value. And that's going to be pretty tough if you're a young fella, because livestock's probably the best way for young people to get into farming right now. And if you're burdened by that, that's just another barrier. And that's what got this whole podcast going. Was you brought me some ideas back when I was in the house, and I didn't go anywhere with them. But through my private life with Deb and retirement talking and things, you threw an idea out a couple weeks ago that really stuck to the wall with me, because it was something that I'd not your specific idea working on, but it really fit into what we were working on. And so we kind of went to a couple meetings, and here we are.
Well, I think that's probably one of the keystones in changing the future. How do we come up with a better policy for transition of our estates, transition of ag land? How do we? Right now, it really seems like we've had policy put in place that really penalizes folks that are exiting or established for transitioning to the next generation.
Yeah, well, we definitely have a tax system. A neighbor of mine told me a long time ago, and you asked about my farming operation. I actually had great uncles to watch. I had some great neighbors to watch that were successful farmers, and you tried to copy them, and I guess that's part of what made my farm successful. Is I'm a pretty good copier. You did that worked for them. I'm going to do that. Well, that didn't work so good. I guess I won't be doing that.
Learn from others' mistakes.
Yeah, right? But you get on that merry-go-round, and then when it's time to retire, it's tough to get off the merry-go-round. And so there's really nothing. The way it's set up right now, the way off the merry-go-round is death. Well, that certainly gets you off the merry-go-round, but there's really no tax burden to the state or the we're talking about stepped up basis now. Yeah. When you die, your spouse would get stepped up basis, which then allows them to be able to sell property. But if you were to, and your idea, I guess I can kind of throw that out.
Yeah,
your idea was to let people before they die basically take advantage of stepped up basis, which is so simple.
Well, and we live in a time now too where, that step up in basis and that wait until you die to capture it, it's wrecking families. It's really hurting the culture because, so much of this land that, when it's the heirs get it, and they're maybe not as tied to agriculture as, our heirs might be someday or yours are today. It's just really easy just to call up the auctioneer and it gets sold, and you really don't have any control of that after you're dead and gone. So wouldn't it be better for our communities to be more planned out and established for the future generations, instead of just kind of winging a prayer and hoping everything works out after we're gone?
Well, I think that's why people are probably going to be interested in our podcast. I hope they are, because although we agree on that policy, there's areas that you think are pretty good, but I'm on the retirement age, and I'm thinking, yeah, Elliott, I don't like that one.
Yeah, I can't
So
wait to have some of these conversations.
yeah, I think that's what's going to make this podcast different, uh, and I think that's what I hope that is what lets people want to tune into it and see what we have to say. I think we got some great guests lined up that will give a lot of input toward it, and they're actually are the ones that will have the final say in it. Some of these guests that we've got lined up, and I think that's going to be exciting for what we've got going on and our planning.
Well, I've heard you say something before, and I've heard it other people say it, and it's keep your powder dry. So we'll have to keep some of our powder dry for these next episodes on what we've got to put out.
That's true. That's true.
Well, Louie, I think our listeners got to learn a little bit about you, and I think they'll be excited to hear us engage in some lively debate and some discussions about policy and how it's going to affect their lives moving as they continue to grow their families and grow their wealth and their operations, especially the farming operations, because that's what we're both is so near and dear to our hearts. So
Yeah, I hope you're right, and I think you will be, and don't get in such a big rush that you don't do it right.
I'll try not to, Louie.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.